Continuing, following this list of lectures on French astrology, and what could be more specific to French astrology, I would like to present the question of what we call the universal pattern. French astrologers, like Barbeau, introduced in the 60s, 70s, the idea that we could have a universal pattern, which means one single pattern to explain everything. It's more or less what was already in stake in the Middle Ages with Abu Mazar in its cycle of the conjunctions, the great conjunctions, Jupiter and Saturn. This research of the universal pattern is comparable to what we have in alchemy with philosophical stone, and most astrologers are failing, are giving up from this possibility, from this prospect. And instead of having a universal pattern, you have an incredibly complex set of patterns in an infinite number of possibilities. So we are today very far from the idea of universal pattern, and an astrologer in general will use as many patterns as he has a great number of cases to study and to analyze. So this is one of the biggest questions. Is it possible to define one single pattern which will be used in any situation? A sort of panacea. Barbeau proposed in his time, in the 60s, something that he called the, I don't know exactly how to translate it in English, sort of concentration system. He would take all the planets beyond Mars till Pluto and calculate when they converge together or when they diverge. And when they converge, there was a certain coefficient in a certain scale. And when they diverge, there was another, the scale was climbing, or the contrary, whatever you want. This pattern was including the two world wars, and was generally considered as being especially useful in mundane astrology. But it didn't work very well for some sort of reasons, maybe the concept, maybe the astronomical basis, maybe the interpretation, whatever. It has been abandoned, but it was one of the major realizations of modern astrology in France in the 20th century. I have reconsidered this possibility of building a universal pattern, and we can call the astrocyclone as a new universal pattern. Actually, I've been searching for this sort of pattern for many decades, and I have considered several solutions and combined several parameters and several criteria. But I think that the pattern I produce and I offer now is quite acceptable and quite useful, although of course it cannot pretend by its own definition to be able to study in a specific manner the problem of a specific person. But its applications are much more considerable than you could think first sight. And I do not separate mundane astrology from individual astrology at all. My pattern can be used in all aspects of life at several degrees. It is based, as I said in previous lectures, on the process of Saturn in relationship with the four royal stars, which are Halbronn and Regulus and Fomalhaut and Antares. And it is a very simple system, although it has been the result of years and years of research, which is not incompatible. And this pattern is synchronic in the sense that it is the same pattern for everybody at the same time. It does not depend at all in the natal chart. And any universal pattern has to be independent from any personal chart. It is incompatible, of course. And Rudia doesn't seem to have been very much concerned by the idea of universal pattern. And I don't know exactly historically when this idea has developed exactly. And what I know is it is something which is subconsciously something that astrologers are looking for, even if it's not as famous as the creation of the stone or whatever. And the challenge here with astrology, and I think that until astrology has not found this pattern, it will not really be accepted and recognized in our society, in the field of science. This is a necessary condition. But on the other hand, and once more I refer to William of Ockham, on the other hand, this pattern has to be as simple as possible, and there is no need for adding things which are not necessary. And that is why one of the reactions that people who believe and who follow the traditional astrology have against this pattern, that it doesn't include all the planets, for instance, that it is not concerned by the symbolism of the zodiac or by all the context which exists at a certain moment. Because in fact, and I already mentioned that in a previous lecture, in fact, what is a big obstacle for the progression of astrology, and for its simplification, which means its return to the origin, because the origin is simple, is the necessity for many astrologers who learn that very, very early in their formation, the necessity of combining all the planets which exist at a certain moment. This necessary combination, interdependence, interconnection of all the planets at a special moment is a sort of postulate of a certain form of astrology which is rejected by the universal pattern, by the idea of universal pattern. And Barbeau understood that very well when, just after the Second World War, he was proposing the idea of planetary cycle. He was only focusing on the planets of this cycle. He was not taking into consideration what was around, not the zodiac, not the other planets, only this group of planets, these two planets which were constituting one of the planetary cycles. So it's very difficult for someone who has learned to combine all what is present at a certain moment, a sort of space astrology, to time than on space. I don't care what are the other planets, but I care where the planet I am studying will be or has been for a certain period of time. Here we have a difficulty, and we see that there is a very strong opposition between this space astrology, which is also an astrology which is not only complex but also which will change at every minute, at every moment, and which has nothing of universal, and an astrology which is only focusing on connection between two stars meaning two celestial bodies, and in the case of Astrocyclone, it is one of the body is a planet and the other body is a star, a fixed star. There is a great difference. Well, of course, if we want to play with the words, we could say that the natal chart is a universal system, in the sense that you can apply this system of the chart to any situation. But it's a very, very abstract conception of a model, of a pattern. It is never the same pattern. So you can say, well, it is always a chart. It is always a chart, and since it is always a chart which has to be erected, then it is universal. But what we call here universal is not that. Not just the fact that you can always make a chart for any situation or any person. It's here the fact that the chart is always the same chart, always the same structure. It's a chart which is a time chart and not a space chart. This chart will concentrate on the different stages of one single cycle, and not on the different positions of all the cycles at a certain moment of time. And there is a big war between those two systems, although, of course, the space system, as I call it, the chart system, is much more popular than the time system. Yeah. But probably that will change. Now, the interest of the universal chart, the universal system, the universal pattern, is that it's very easy to teach it, to transmit it. And you don't have too many years of study to master, to control, to understand this system. So it is a system which you can develop and teach to everybody. It's a simple tool, and it changes totally the problem, because in fact you do not have to rely on a practitioner, on an astrologer who will interpret the chart, this specific chart, who has learned a long time to be able to interpret, to translate, to comment the chart. And with a universal system, it's something more universal also, in the sense that everybody can use it and understand it. It becomes really a tool that everybody can use, and it's very different from the system of the chart, which is reserved to certain people who have learned to understand the different positions of the planet at a certain moment and combine them, and it's that sort of cocktail that they know how to produce. So I don't know if a broad the idea of universal system has been a matter of research or of discussion. I'm afraid that it is not the case, but maybe I'm wrong. But I'm afraid that, on the contrary, American astrology, for instance, seems to be fascinated by adding more factors, more elements, more asteroids, more everything what you want, and that it is, on the contrary, the space system which is more and more developed and more heavy and more difficult to transfer and to transmit to the normal person in the street. And this creates a sort of ghetto for astrology. And the universal system is precisely supposed to afford astrology to emancipate itself from this sort of ghetto, because it is a fact that we can say that the universal system is like a sort of personal computer that everybody knows how to use, and he doesn't need someone else to help him how to use it. And it's exactly in the same sense that we mentioned that. This is sort of a paradox that something universal can be very personal. And I would like to develop this point. For instance, if I sell hammers, I sell hammer. Now, hammer is a universal tool for what it is to be used. But everybody can use it in his own way, can apply it in his own way. So it is universal, but at the same time, it can be used by every person in its own way, And while with the space system, chart system, a natal system, the client only gets information through the astrologer, gets a sort of translation, and doesn't have any real contact with the tool. And he doesn't know how the tool works. So the astrologer has to use the tool for him, to replace him behind the tool in a certain way. And this creates a lot of difficulties because you cannot do certain things for someone else. You know. It's impossible. You have to guess. You have to enter into a sort of process of divination. While just because you do it for someone else, I have to guess what he really wants, what he really feels. The idea of guessing, the idea of even of divination, is based on the fact that you have to do something for someone else. You have to enter into the skin of someone else to replace him. Divination is a matter of replacing someone by someone else. With the universal system, you don't have to replace anybody. The person learns very quickly in a few minutes the system. He can have it with him in his pocket at any moment. Although, of course, and that has to be very clear, the system doesn't change every moment. On the contrary, we have a 7-year system. Every 7 years, a group of 7 years is divided into periods of 3.5 years. So it's not something which will change from one day to another. And here also, it is a difference with your other system, where through transits, etc., you have very often something which will happen in the system, which will change the system, which will transit some points of the chart, etc., etc. So that you really need the ephemeris or a computer to know exactly what is the situation at a certain moment. And it is so complex that in fact you don't have a good visibility of the future, or only of a very, very, very immediate future. And most astrologers today are only able to work on a very immediate future. While the universal system, you can really work on years and years behind, before, in advance, and the references to ephemeris is very, very limited. You only have to know from time to time where Saturn is, which is of course not in the universal system itself, but it is given if you use a computer. It is given by the ephemeris, which will give you the position of Saturn at any moment. So the astrocyclone needs, of course, an application for a specific time. But you can have an astrocyclone for 20 years. You have it, and you keep it, and then afterwards you don't have to use any computer. You only have to see where you are. It's a sort of calendar of another type. So our universal system might be a great contribution of French astrology to world astrology. And once more, I think that French astrology has really, for some unknown reason, has really taken a right path. The fact that astronomy is a danger, that we should not be overwhelmed by astronomical data, is an essential matter. We must not forget that in the 19th century, until the very last years of the 19th century at least, French astrology was not at all sympathetic with the new planets. They were nearly absent from any literature in astrology. It is true that it was also a time when astrology was combined with occult sciences, with tarot, etc., etc. But modernity was certainly brought by Anglo-Saxon astrology in England and in the States. But in fact, this modernity was a poisoned gift. And I really think that it was not a good thing. The introduction of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and asteroids was not a good point for astrology. We can say that after a certain time, after a certain delay. If we have to say today what is the situation, I don't think that what was decided during the 19th century, especially in the middle of the 19th century, around Neptune, was not the best thing for astrology.